Welcome to the Module 3 of our course on meaningful stakeholder engagement. In this module, we'll start by looking at what happens before the actual engagement and meetings, and we will also talk about some good practice principles on how meetings and consultation events should be undertaken. We start by ensuring that, as this slide says, there has to be information to stakeholders prior to consultation events. It is not reasonable to just invite people to a public meeting, tell them about a project, and expect them to have an opinion about it in a short time. This information needs to be provided early on in a way that is meaningful locally. This means, for example, that if the majority of the local population does not speak Spanish or Portuguese, we need to provide it in local indigenous languages or other appropriate languages. We need to do it visually or verbally to people who are illiterate, and in general make sure that this is meaningful. There is a good practice example shown here in these photographs. Detailed technical studies, which were quite complex in a project in Colombia, were translated into easy to understand visuals, such as this problem tree with different impacts, activities of the project, and the people were discussing those when we attended these consultation events. You see the lady in the hat is explaining about the project. She was very familiar with it, and she had clear views about how she expected the project to provide local benefits, as did the little girl who was 11 years old. So this was done in a transparent way where the whole community engaged in the discussion. The typical thing to do when we hold consultation events is to have one large public hearing or a meeting, but we should consider supplementing this with other ways of discussing with people. Not everybody is able to speak in a formal public meeting, so marginal or vulnerable groups may need to have individual discussions, focus group discussions. Academics could perhaps be invited to a workshop or seminar. Government officials could be interviewed separately, and much of the information can come as part of doing the baseline studies through surveys, census studies, and other information gathering. And we can also be innovative and think about electronic media, social media, and other ways of involving people. The key principle to remember here is that we make sure that each identified stakeholder group and subgroup is represented, and each has a way of expressing their views and their concerns. Some of the points we hope to cover in the consultation events may include the objectives and structure of the event, the likely project impacts, listening to people about their perceptions and expectations of the project, and then try to capture what we can do to change the design to improve both in terms of enhancing benefits and avoiding or mitigating risk and adverse impacts. There are some practical aspects to this. For example, we may well need to consider translations if not everyone speaks the majority language. And we may need to focus on marginal groups that do not speak out in public and follow up with them separately. At these events, we should also explain how the people may engage with the project in the future, and we should tell them that there will be a grievance redress mechanism where people can come with concerns and complaints if they feel the project is not working well, and which then can seek to mediate or resolve the issues or provide remedy to people when necessary. Feedback and transparency, as the next slide shows, is also essential. Once we get the information from the consultation events, we need to make sure that people get the feedback, that they're told in a timely and relevant way how their concerns are being addressed. A nice way to do that is to summarize what happens and where, with whom, and what was discussed, what was agreed on, if anything, how these recommendations from the discussion have been or will be integrated in project design and implementation, and we also need to highlight areas where there may not be full agreement. And we need to tell people how the future communications will take place and how they will continue to stay engaged with the project.